in holiness, and also serve a way of helping your members want to be participating and active and stay members. So it all kind of works together in that way. Here's some of the objectives for this particular presentation today. How the programs can serve the Serra mission. To summarize how Programs Committee works to help meet the needs of clubs. To share what some U.S. clubs are doing well and how all clubs can imitate it. And lastly, to describe how strong club programs are an integral part of Serra's strategic plan. That's under one of the goals for the strategic plan that we're tackling right now. That's the third goal, and it's priority 3 under the third goal. We'll talk about that in detail. And then at the end, after that, I do have just a couple of summary slides of a survey that was sent out just a week ago. So when we're talking about programs, this is one thing that can be unnecessarily complicated, but just to simplify it for our discussion, internal programs are things that are directed towards your members. So if you have a committee or maybe a VP for programs and the club president, and you talk about, well, what are we going to do at our next meeting? You're talking about your internal program. If you're talking about a whole year, that's also, what are we going to do when we meet in February and then March? Those are these internal programs. There are special programs and that come along the way, like we have every year. We have an affirmation event. That's fine too, and that's great. And that's also a great reason why you want to, have these worked out ahead of time. Like every December, we have a really big banquet for, the priests and sisters in our area, or maybe the seminarians if they have their, semester break. So there's those special programs too. But planning ahead of time is a really important strategy. If you can have a whole year, that's best, but not all clubs can do that. But we certainly have in our club in Lima, Ohio. So you have sort of a master schedule. And we meet during the school year, so we work on the master schedule, and it's pretty much done by our first meeting in September. The special programs, when we were doing this, kind of working through the website renovation, we were kind of actually Mike Downey was looking at, well, how are we going to organize some of these things? And one of the things was coming up, well, there's certain things that clubs kind of do, and it's kind of hard to categorize them, so we kind of gave them this term, special programs. But appreciation events for priests and those in religious life, adoration for vocations. When it is organized by a parish, that is different. So if your parish has a holy hour, that is a little different because it's kind of in their hands. Serrans should obviously participate in that, and they can actually dovetail that. It's a really neat idea to actually approach the pastor and organizers for that holy hour and say, hey, could we have a reception or whatever, because Serrans are really for this, or could vocations be the primary intention for that holy hour? Those are wonderful ideas. But for our intention purposes, organizing an adoration for your members. Also a mass for deceased Serrans and a retreat day or a day of recollection. That last one is actually part of the list of things that are part of the strategic plan. So we'll actually see that. So what do functions do for your club? Back when your club was starting and they were getting their charter kind of worked out and kind of preparing for that big day, well, they had to get together and decide, well, when do we meet? What are we going to do when we meet? Those big questions are really what programs is. What do clubs do when they meet? The typical kind of structure is that you have your prayer component, you have your social component, and sometimes there's a meal associated with it, and then you have your information, hopefully pretty inspiring, and that's your speaker. That's a typical kind of a club meeting. There are atypical club meetings, and actually there are atypical clubs. We've been kind of hearing a little bit about that this weekend. One of them in Crookston, which is like a virtual club, and also the extraordinary things that are happening at the club in the Chicago area. That's really amazing, some of the things that they're describing, and for circumstances that are kind of unique to their situation. So it's beautiful. what I'd like to, I guess, roughly say at this point that, it's not a either or scenario. It's not, we have to do it the same way all the time, every time, or we have to throw all that stuff out and just do it willy-nilly. It's not either one or the other. Those are kind of extremes. Really a good year has a little bit of both. You have some things that you can rely on. You have a schedule that everybody can kind of mark on their own schedule. You can kind of predict and you kind of have that set aside so people attend those meetings. But you also have something that's kind of special for that year, that people can kind of look forward to and maybe, say, hey, you know what, I think you'd like to come to this one particularly. If you have talked to your friend about joining Serra, we're having a really special meeting in November. Please come to the November meeting. You love it, something like that. One of the great things that programs does is it allows for hospitality, right? So you're inviting people to come, and part of the program's chair or the VP for programs would be to say, well, if we're having a guest speaker, are they going to be able to find us? Are they going to be welcome when they get there? So we're in our high school is where we have ours is at a local Catholic high school, and it's chapel. There's a room off to the back and the side, so finding their way there is always a path to take, and so we have to make sure that our speaker doesn't get lost or something. So they're at the door waiting for them. But also another function that they would, besides for the hospitality, is you're providing a structure that people can grow in holiness, right? And they can have some inspiration and information to take away from every meeting. The typical experience at a club is that you come to the speaker portion, and you maybe have a priest that you might have seen, for Sundays for weeks, but you've really never heard their vocation story. So you come to a Serra meeting, and you may be able to hear a little bit more in detail about how they became a priest. That's a real typical experience. And it should be said, the reasons that people become Serrans is that they want to get to know priests and religious better. So that's a really wonderful thing. There are vocation stories that we have heard a lot. So, variety in that sense is a really, really strong point, especially if you look over the course of a year, another year, and another year. So you kind of want to think about, your Serran members and the kind of things that they've heard. And if a priest comes in and is going to give a talk, you may want to say, this is what the kind of things that we've been kind of thinking about learning more about this year. Oftentimes clubs will pick a theme, maybe. So this year we want to, learn more about this. What does it mean to have a Jubilee year? And that's the theme of this Jubilee year. So maybe you can ask your guest speaker to delve a little bit more in detail about that. At our club, we provide a stipend for speakers. Not every club does that. We have a difference in the amount that we pay for people that are local. They have just a 5-minute drive to get to where we're going, versus those who drive, say, an hour and a half or something like that. So we have an out-of-town sort of stipend, which is different. We take into account, or we're thinking like, well, the person's coming from out of town, and it's like 3 hours away. Our meeting is over maybe by 8. We can't expect them necessarily to just turn around and go home, because that's a long drive for them, perhaps. So we're wondering if they're going to be staying and if they have accommodations. Our chaplain has space in the rectory, and often will approach them. He won't assume it, but he'll approach them and say, hey, if you would want to, you could stay at the rectory tonight or something like that. So Lima is in Northwest Ohio, and a couple of months ago we had a Benedictine priest, monk from St. Meinrid's, which is several hours away in Indiana. Okay, the resources that we provide, this is some of the things that the programs committee can provide for clubs. Number one, resources. Personal growth and holiness. The handbook for Serrans Called to Holiness. This is one of the things that's included with your, introductory fee when you become a member. It's a really great tool and resource, so I would highly encourage you to use that often. The reading that I got here, the scripture reading, was conveniently found in this. It does give lots of amazing information and resources, like a list of recommended readings, about your personal growth and holiness, that's a really great resource. And it really does focus on Serrans in particular. And one part of it, and I'm going to pull it up, is the introduction, Serran Spirituality, by Father Joseph Cizzetti. I don't know how to pronounce that. Is that pronounced right? It's really great, just about 6 pages long. You could kind of glean through that pretty quickly, less than an hour. So I'd highly encourage that kind of a thing. It can often be used also, as a springboard during a meeting if you should need to have something to kind of grab at the last minute. That would be one way to do that. But it is really geared towards somebody who's opening up, who's a Serran, right? So it's kind of more of an individual growth and holiness. Faith formation, it's great. There's a lot of ways of helping people grow in their faith, and it's not necessarily your job to help people with that personally, but you want to kind of think of that. Well, how are they growing? What are some things that they're asking about? What are their questions kind of reflect? Maybe they need to learn a little bit more about this. So from a national point of view, we've been kind of, tossing ideas around, and we've had these program teleconference meetings, Zoom meetings that you all are certainly aware of, and it's the second Monday of the month, last fall, we were getting kind of on the wave of the Eucharistic Congress, and so we were talking about, well, what is adoration, and what are some of the traditions behind that? So we kind of delved a little bit deeper into that. We also looked at our own call to holiness and the role models, because we were right at October, and we were looking at, well, November 1st is just around the corner. What about saints? What is the role of saints in our faith journey? And as the epitome or the greatest of the saints would be our Blessed Mother. So we talked a little bit more about what our Blessed Mother, what we believe about the Blessed Virgin Mary, and sort of the history of that, which is really something that I found that was pretty interesting to dig into a little bit. So there's lots of ways if you are delving into a particular topic, how does it affect Serrans? How does it help them grow? And when you're praying, all these things, help us come together and be a part of the church. And part of that, as Sister was saying earlier today, is being a missionary church. So how are we sent to proclaim the gospel to others? In what way? And some of that is through the service we provide. So whether it be to be an active part of a parish or anything like that, you want to encourage people to have that mindset that we're Serrans, we're serving the church, and in particular we're serving the bishop, the vocations office. So, and that's kind of the unique character of that club in the Chicago area, is that they really do work kind of very close with their vocations director. And I know that from my experience in the Great Lakes region, that Cleveland has the same relationship. Every time they have, every other month or something like that, their vocation director is at their meetings, which is really wonderful, of all of the club presidents. So that's kind of a district council right there. So best practices. This is a really good opportunity to have for you all to be able to hear each other's best practices. The opportunities to grow and encounter with Christ. Adoration. Boy, this morning I was very inspired by Cardinal Collins' words, and I kept thinking to myself, the timing couldn't have been better for me selfishly, because I needed to talk a little bit about it. But he was saying that you will draw with joy, you will draw water from the wells of salvation, and he used the word oasis more than once, and how dry our life can sometimes feel. We're kind of in the midst of this struggle, and hope is this really strong, kind of sturdy virtue. Working with vocations, I hear this repeatedly in the care surveys, that people are drawn to adoration. They're drawn to holy hours, and today there's a real starvation. There's a real craving for silence. I mean, they don't have it, and they don't feel necessarily comfortable to it, but they really have a great need for it. They don't necessarily realize it, but when they have a taste of what it means to sit down and sort of unplug, in a sense, they really find that it's very nurturing. So This is just me speaking personally, I think the propedeutic year is, the space that's allowed a seminarian to come in and learn who they are, to kind of tune everything out, to focus in on where God is calling them in that moment, and to kind of be aware of others, brothers, other seminarians who are in that same stage. And so they're forming relationships with others who are in that same form, and they're really spending a lot of time just with prayer and with tuning into God at that time. Very little emphasis on, hitting the theology and that kind of thing at that point. So, a major part of that is unplugging, though, because many of them have spent a lot of time with that, with media and with their sort of smartphones and stuff. The need is distraction becomes a kind of addiction. So we become more and more dependent upon it. And the more you sort of experience a little bit of something outside of that, the more you realize how much you depend upon it. So that's kind of where I'm kind of coming from. So it's an intentional choice to do that. Every one of us has that. Okay, everybody has that choice to make, right? So how much are we going to pay attention to our own holiness? And I've tried to spend, say, an hour on an average day in prayer. I tell you, my goal is for 20 minutes of that hour to be silent. That is not easy. I'm telling you, that's really tough. And that's the hardest thing I do. I do a lot of other things that are sort of discipline related. That is the single hardest one, just because my brain is always spinning, and so it's always wanting something. And when I force myself to sit and be still and be in the presence of the Lord, it's a lot different. But that is where your heart is the most open and hearing that voice. And that's why it's in stress so much. That's why we hear so much about that when, newly ordained describe their prayer life and stuff. So adoration, can't really say enough about that. It's a beautiful time. The membership, needs to be attended to in every club. If you are doing things well in a club, you're helping your members stay engaged. You're also providing them a reason to show up at meetings and to have that fellowship with one another. So, making sure that they know what to expect at your next program, making sure that it's well known. Also, advertising it like in bulletins and things like that. That's really basic. We've actually picked up, I think, 3 members just in the last couple of months just because we put it in the bulletin. They just saw it and showed up, and it was really remarkable. 2 of this couple came from a county north of us, and this is a county that is like 90% Catholic. And we didn't have any membership up there. We have a lot of signs that they're ready for it, but we haven't pushed through that, and I just kept planting the seed. And they came up to me and said they want to start a club. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, great, satellite. That was my first thought. We have to get them started, and we have to probably introduce it as a satellite model first. And I had explained a little bit of that to them, but now they were just thinking about membership. Now they are officially a member, so hopefully this spring we'll see what direction that goes. But membership is a part of some of the things you do with programs too. When I mentioned to Maury, he's my predecessor as VP for programs, and he's the regional director in Northwest. He couldn't make this weekend, but he was emailing me back saying, you're going to do fine, Gino, about this presentation. This is what I would suggest for our own call to holiness. And Maury takes this extremely seriously. I really respect him for that. Absolutely. So he says, nothing before God. In the busyness of life, it is hard to even take time to pray. Yet we have to do it nevertheless. Enroll the help of the Blessed Mother Mary. God bless him. That's true. And here's just an example. Arms yourself. ARMS yourself. Okay, so this is what it stands for. Pray in holy adoration. There's your A. Pray the rosary. There's your R. Actively participate in Mass. There's your M. And S, serve. Support seminarians, priests, religious, one another. Serve one another. Living out our Serra spirituality, some of that can be found in here. Page 21, I just mentioned that one, Serra spirituality explained. And there's 5 biblical steps on how to grow in being one with Jesus. I gleaned through that. I couldn't find anything listing it that way, but there's some things I kind of think he was referring to. Reading the Bible and the Catechism. So there's the formation, the faith formation. If you know your Bible, if you're comfortable with what you can find in the Bible, and also if you can stretch yourself to look through the Catechism, I think that I don't suggest reading the Catechism page from cover to cover, just only because it's very dry and it would be hard to do that. Now, there are some apps there's some like podcasts that actually break it up, like Catechism in a Year. You've heard that about Bible in a Year. So there's one that's available for the Catechism in a Year. So that's a much better strategy. Honestly, when the Catechism came out, it was John Paul II. And say 5-10 years later, I can't remember, I'd have to look at the dates again, but there was a book that came out called the Compendium. That was put out by Pope Benedict XVI. That I would recommend. It's so much easier. There's like 598 questions and answers. That's basically the church's teaching. So it's presenting the catechism in a question and answer format. So it's condensed. So it's much more like, okay, well, this is what I've been asked, or this is what I want to find out. So you can look up where that question is listed, and you can find the answer for it. So it's pretty simple. It's a little bit more direct than, say, the approach you would need if you really glean through the catechism. So the way the catechism is presented. John Paul II's apostolic exhortation, Christa Fidelis Laity. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but that's one of the things that is actually quoted in here. And it gives this: life according to the Spirit. This is really how service is important. Whose fruit is holiness, stirs up every baptized person, and requires each to follow and imitate Jesus Christ in embracing the Beatitudes, in listening and meditating on the Word of God, in conscious and active participation in the liturgical and sacramental life of the Church, in personal prayer, within family, within community, in the hunger and thirst for justice, in the practice of the commandment of love in all circumstances of life, and service to the brethren, especially the least, the poor, and the suffering. The examples that were voiced this weekend for how membership needs are being met by clubs, the Detroit club had a come and see a meeting that was kind of right after, like, say, 8 days after their weekend at that particular parish. What a great strategy. So it was planned out. That didn't just happen out of nowhere. They had to plan it out carefully. Say, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to put all this energy in this. This is how it will work out, and this is how we can really, get the most, help those who are really curious to get the most exposure to Serra and make a decision about whether it's something that would meet their need right then. So that's a great strategy. That's the need of that club, right? They saw that and they went for it. Keep members engaged in some kind of service. I think Peter had mentioned that, this new member, we got him on that 7 Serra prayer team right away. That's extremely important, right? Keeping them engaged. There's a lot of other kinds of things that are a little bit more, in the moment. So you have some people that are just part of the hospitality. Maybe they're part of how you plan. If you have a mass, they're part of that liturgy. We have some people that are musically inclined at our club, so they help with the music for the liturgy. I know Tiffin Club, they have some members that are kind of the caterers and maybe leading parts of the rosary. So the other kinds of things for the programs committee, provide training. That was one of the things that was brought up a lot. And actually the programs committee doesn't necessarily have to provide that, but the USA Council does, because the leadership committee actually does the training. They provide training services to all the different officers, and they do that every year. The last 2024, those sessions, there's 5 different recordings that are on the U.S. Council website. One of those sessions, I believe, links programs, I want to say vocations. I think that's correct. But anyway, you can find the programs portion of that in there. So I put that under there. The recordings of the club officer training are there, as I said, 5. There are, like every other sort of area of Serra, there are virtual meetings every month, and one of the things that we try to emphasize is that we try to inspire and inform with every meeting, but we also try to, and I want to maybe stress this more in this upcoming one in February, to allow time for members to hear each other. Because what's kind of unique and what's really beautiful about and we kind of talked about this in our USA Council board meeting, is that when we're coming together with these rallies now, this is kind of a luxury because we're kind of on the dovetailing with other things that happen all year long. Years ago, the rally was it, or the super weekend was it, maybe twice a year. And then you kind of waited another 6 months or something like that for the next time to get together. So we have all kinds of opportunities to kind of get together in other ways now. So this is a beautiful thing that we can take advantage of. And when we have these, online meetings, these conference calls through Zoom platform, everybody needs to have a voice, So I want to make sure that, especially for programs, that we're hearing what other people are doing, because they sometimes feel like they're doing their thing in isolation, and that shouldn't be the case, because Serrans are most strong and stuff when they hear each other, what they're doing. It's very encouraging. The link for that is always provided in the Always Forward e-newsletter. It always starts at the same time. My experience is that it's always the same link number and everything like that, but I could be wrong. You update. The other thing that we want to provide is resources that are updated, and that is something that is high on the priority. Especially, it has not happened yet, but especially what I noticed when gleaning through the information that is there is that what's missing is information about Mass for Deceased Serrans and retreats. There are some clubs in the country that do those well, and I just want to make sure and get information from them about how they work that out. And I have started that. I had some information provided to me from some of your help to be able to get some information from, like, the retreat that's held in Buffalo, Minnesota, and some other places as well. Holy Hour for Vocations, there's other sort of special programs and resources. However, they don't necessarily have to be included with anything under programs because they're already included underneath the Serra Spark website. Okay, so that's where it gets a little bit gray. Okay, so there's 3 special programs that would be maybe more, you would find more information about that at the Serra Spark website, serraspark.org. Okay, so tool number 20, Holy Hours. Holy Hours for Vocations is tool number 20. And so you'll find some great resources on how you can organize the Holy Hours there. I can even give you some tips myself if you're curious. Tool number 11 is Priesthood Sunday. If you want to have some great ideas about how to organize some way to affirm your priests, that's a great place to go. And tool number 29 is annual vocation events. And that's a great place to find things to affirm, like priests, not only priests, but sisters and brothers, because they have an annual event every year that's just directed towards them. So underneath there, you can kind of find some things that can be organized for that. And it should be added in February 2nd, is the Feast of the Presentation. That's traditionally World Day of Prayer for Consecrated Life. So that brings it to the strategic plan. That's been brought up, and I wanted to make sure and include a little bit more, flesh out a little bit about what's been asked of us and how we're kind of approaching that. So the vision, as it was mentioned, was to become recognized as the worldwide resource for supporting religious vocations. The overarching goal of the whole strategic plan is to foster a culture of vocations to the ministerial priesthood among parishes, schools, and families. Because it's this big 10-year goal, we kind of chunked it up a little bit, and in our wisdom and the wisdom of people like Dr. Ann wrote, we're kind of looking at, okay, there's some goals: increase awareness of our work for Serra at all levels. That includes your bishop, your priests, and the USCCB at all those levels, and amongst people in the parish. Improve local club engagement at the parish level, making sure that clubs are doing things at their parishes, starting vocation ministries at their parishes. And also expand how we are supporting local clubs. That goal number 3 is where we're putting a lot of time in at this time. And one of those aspects of this particular one, priority 3, is really about programs. Priority 3 says strengthen programs and materials that foster and support vocations and personal call to holiness. There are under every priority, there are different specific things that people can do, like especially, those of us who are kind of in leadership positions. This is what we can do. A, B, C, D, and E, and F, or E and E. Immediately after our USA board meeting on Thursday, we had a meeting with the USA Council president, the past president, and all of the club presidents who were there. at the time. And so we had this great discussion, and it was some great opportunity for people to kind of say, well, this is what's happening, and this is what I was wondering about, and this is what I was struggling about. And so it was a really great opportunity to hear what's going on. We don't get those opportunities as often as we should, so it was really exciting to see that. One of the tasks that I have is number A there, to create a committee of club presidents to develop a tool for program evaluation. So one of the things that was asked of us is that, well, how can we know if we're doing a good job or not? So we really want to develop that tool to help people know if they're, well, could they do some work, and then how would they go about, where are they kind of weak, and where could they do some work to improve? Number B, the website revision, I have to say, is still in process, and the program's part of that is very outdated, so we have a lot of work left to do there. Number C, best practices that clubs are currently doing. This is a great opportunity for that, so I want to make sure and provide time for you to hear each other and highlight some best practices. And D, promote and share programs that offer an opportunity to encounter Christ and and foster personal growth. The Bible and the Catechism I mentioned already are wonderful things, and if there's some ways you can glean out of the Catechism, I would highly encourage that. I feel comfortable with it, but it does take some time and investment to do that. And this is a great resource as well. And there are some things in here that you really can use at the club to generate discussion amongst clubs, amongst people in one of your meetings. So after having this, these challenges and one of those things being, well, what are the best practices out there? We have to say, well, we have to do a survey, and this is the ones that are registered in Club Express. So if the information of your club officers is not up to date, guess what? Your VP for programs did not receive that survey. It might have been last year's, or maybe, I don't know, somebody else. But there was 81 that were sent out. 16, that's just a week ago. 16 have been returned to this point, which is a rate of about 19%, almost 20%. So I had to combine some questions to make it just 10. But the VP for programs, how long have they held that office? Who they are, what club do they have, what's the name of their club, and how long have you held your office? So the median age. So you had all these responses. If you had all of them laid out, where's the middle point of that? It's about 2.5 years. So half of those returned were less than 2.5 years, and half of those returned were more than 2.5 years. How does your club offer members to grow spiritually at your meetings? Well, we do rosary. That was actually the biggest number, right? 53%. But Mass was really high up there also. It's interesting that it's probably easier for a club, an average club, at a given time to actually play a rosary than it is to have the Mass, because obviously you have to make arrangements to make sure you have a celebrant. And not all clubs can do that for every meeting. So that was an interesting thing that I gleaned from that. Eucharistic adoration, 33%, that's a third, that's great. And retreats, I was actually surprised at 13%. That's over a tenth of the clubs who responded actually offer retreats. Something, a day of recollection, they kind of call it different things. There was one club that responded, and this is just one of the 16, that said they actually do a pilgrimage every year, which is really cool. We're kind of in Northwest Ohio, we have an area called this area of steeples, like 16 steeples. You from one area you can see like 6 steeples around in one area, just because there's such a concentration of German Catholics that moved there and or migrated there, and they just built these amazing, monuments to their faith. And so there's lots of places to go for it's like a pilgrimage experience. And there's at least 2 that we have done in our club in the Lima area. But that's a great way of helping people. And it's a variety. It's not something you do. It's a distant place, right? So it's exciting to kind of talk about how we're going to make a pilgrimage to a certain place. Other questions in the survey: how does your club plan its meetings? That was an important question. Do they use a committee? Or is it just a committee of one person? Do you consult a club chaplain? Is your club chaplain engaged or not? That was pretty interesting. 60% said they actually do consult their club chaplain. I was encouraged by that. 13% said that they actually just kind of asked their club members, right? They take a poll kind of, what do you want to hear at our program the next couple of weeks or next couple of months meetings? Also the same kind of thing, they actually asked for input from club board members. So those are all fine. The one thing that we emphasize is that if you have a programs committee, basically you have a group of people who are bringing ideas together and they're coming up with a plan, a master schedule. And that really allows for variety, to be included with that, because you're not just getting one person's point of view, which is really important. If you have one person that's only doing it, always done it, it becomes really the same, because it feels the same each time after a while. So it's really important to have a committee that actually can kind of give different points of view and have a little bit more variety. We had our chaplain actually part of that committee this year. He actually came to the committee meeting, gave input, actively involved. He actually introduced a couple of our speakers himself. Beautiful engagement by our chaplain. We're just really grateful for that, Father Kent. So the committee also allows for quality, as I mentioned, with the variety, and also continuity. So from one year to the other, if one person who's been in charge forever, if heaven forbid something happened to them, somebody can actually take over because somebody else in the committee has been exposed to that kind of thing already. This is our first year with a new VP for programs. The person, she took her place, had been VP for programs for 8 years, at least. So, so this was a really good start this year, or fresh start, I should say. So training and resources, what kind of resources do you use when you plan your program? So those are some of the responses. Training, 40% said they actually attended training or actually watched the video, right? 25% they have actually consulted one of the manuals. There's 2 manuals. One of them is a VP for Programs manual, and the other one is Programs manual for Serrans called to Holiness, I think is the whole title. But 19% said they actually attended the teleconference Zoom call that I mentioned, which is a pretty small number. We was really needing to have a little bit more people attending. What kind of special programs are used? Adoration for Vocation, 60%. That was really good. Mass for Deceased Serrans, 26%, and retreats, 26%. What are some of your most successful programs? This was the most interesting one. Some of them were the standard things like, well, we have appreciation events and those always successful. Our club can relate to that. Everybody always comes to those meetings because it's such a great experience. We do it right between Christmas and New Year's. And it used to be just for priests and maybe deacons, and we just felt like sisters, we couldn't find a good time for them that they were able to come, and we just included it, and it was a really great thing. And we had several sisters this year. This is our 2nd or 3rd year combining them, and they just told us it was just a great event, and they appreciated all of the opportunity they had to hear from other people and to be with their other sisters in other orders too. Some of them said, well, I was discerning going through my, getting in my novitiate at the same time as some of these other sisters from a different order. And so we had a lot in common, and we were able to share some more stories. Membership night, yeah, that was, the way it's described, I was thinking it's sort of like that come and see where it's an information night, right? So they come in and get exposed to, so it's structured like, okay, this is what, a communications, this is the kind of thing that a person does in our club that's just involving communications. This is what a membership person is doing. And vocations, this is the kind of activity we do for vocations to support vocations. And so it's really heavy on the information about what a club does. And so a new person will really get exposed to that. That's sort of a new membership night. And really, they have some great videos for that purpose as well, right? We have a new membership orientation video. One of the responses was an annual Advent party. I want to say that was from North Columbus, Frank, but I can't. Okay, that's what I'm guessing. But it sounds like an affirmation event, unless I'm mistaken. Or
yeah, it's growing into mostly
affirmation. The other one that's been fleshed out a little bit here at this weekend is the Happy Holy Hour, or Holy Happy Hour. Maybe I got that reversed, but it's done every quarter, and it's done at a different parish. And it's a really interesting thing, because you're taking a regular club meeting and you're making sure it's a really, really good one, and then you're putting it in a parish. So instead of having your normal sort of rosary or mass at your location, you're actually dovetailing with what the mass is at that church. So it's really great, and you're encouraging people at that church to kind of join you for your meeting. So a wonderful thing. But they have social, a dinner, and a speaker. And I think they particularly pick masses or parishes where they have an evening mass, like a 5 or 6 o'clock mass. But that is in not St. Louis.
Des Moines.
Des Moines. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. There was another thing, and this is not an unusual one at all, but basketball game between priests and high school students. That's really pretty common. And what I've seen particularly was a softball game between priests and seminarians, and it was at Kokomo. It's great, and it's it's a little league baseball stadium. So you all come out to this baseball stadium, and the environment is just wonderful. And they have lots of photographs. It's amazing what they post on social media with that. So I really enjoyed it when I was able to go to that. And so what can Serra do to better support your club? We can suggest certain speakers. We can share what other clubs are doing, and we can provide some personal contact, right, to call or to offer a particular visit or a personal visit, and training. It's interesting that they put that there. When you just have a survey, you don't get the full story. So I really am curious if they meant they wish they took advantage of the training, or if they meant that they wish we provided it, because we do, but you know what I mean. We do have a list of speakers and topics. I think I gleaned this from one of the slides that was provided by Mike during the leadership training, so I can share some of them. Obviously have your bishop or vocations director, parents of seminarians, religious orders, focus missionaries. We've used that quite a lot at our club. And actually, that's one of the brand new tools that was mentioned about vocations in Serra Spark. School principals, directors of religious ed, the VP for vocations from the Knights of Columbus. That's new to me, but okay. Missionaries, that would be some of the missionaries perhaps for focus or other kinds of campus missions, but not necessarily. It could be missionaries, more traditional sense of missionary. Somebody who does journalism for the Catholic newspaper, perhaps. Club member panels of people. We actually had a great example of a panel earlier today, and USA Club officers. Topics, how to ask somebody. One of the, what's important to look at when you look at those vocation tools is that they're not all equal. Some of them are just prayer related. Some of them are affirmation related. Some of them are invitation. Do not overlook that. That is, if there's anything that is a job of a Serran, it's to invite. So the single most powerful program that we have that I know of is called Call by Name. Yeah. Now it's not a perfect program, I'm not saying that, but what it does do, what it proposes to do is to glean from a parish those who would make good priests and sisters. So it's a snapshot right then of who would be a person to approach and say, hey, have you thought about this? Okay. Now, the only feedback I've heard about that kind of thing is what you do with the information when it's gleaned. Okay, so once you have sort of a person's name and maybe their contact information, well, what happens to that? Well, that's a good question, and the vocations office should run with that. Sometimes they can, and sometimes it's difficult. So I don't know how it's handled from place to place, but that's just the idea of inviting personally somebody to consider that is extremely important. You're planting the seed. It may, they may put it on the back burner, but some point along their life, they're going to remember that somebody asked. We used to use the acronym I see in you. I see in you these qualities that would make you a great priest, a great sister. It's a great thing to do that. What are your best programs? How can the USA Council help provide you with more support to inspire, inform, and help your members grow in holiness? One of the suggestions that was listed here was the talk that was given, and actually it's been brought up earlier, the talk that Pope Francis gave in 2017 to Serrans, to be friends to priests, sustaining their vocation and accompanying them in their ministry. With this great gift, you enrich the church. This is, above all else, what a Serran is, a special friend whom the Lord has brought into the lives of seminarians and priests. The church and priestly vocations need you. So that's one little manual or a little trifold for joinserra.org. We do have some time for some other subject matter, so please raise your hand if you have a question or if you want to share something.
Yeah. I've had quite a few questions about 7 Serrans. So I just want to say to you that here are some things we need to do. 7 Serrans in itself is really a program that's going to help your membership. And what they do is we have one person praying an hour a day for a year. And you know what I tell people? Mother Teresa says you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be successful. You just have to try. Because sometimes people will say, I'm afraid I'm going to forget my day. And I say, just put it on your calendar. It won't be that hard.